It's an honor to be here and appreciate the invitation. Actually, I head up another organization called TCCC as well, but that stands for Tennessee Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Our mission for the chamber at the other TCCC was to help Tennessee companies export back to China. No matter how good your product is, if you cannot sell, you cannot be successful today. And that's what I'd like to share with you all today. Some of the things I've learned and mistakes I've made in the area of one of the most important areas, which is marketing. I'd like to also appreciate Sandra Lee for the arrangement, for the invitation, and good to see Ben and Robert. So I call this talk Be Original, Counter Trend, and Be Willing to Travel on the Road Less Traveled. Next slide, please. Something very unusual happened several months ago. Facebook became a $100 billion company overnight. Facebook, in a short 7 years, has surpassed companies such as GE, Walt Disney. All these companies spent decades working hard, but Facebook just surpassed it in terms of companies' value. So what is about Facebook and Google which set them apart from the companies of yesterday? I call all companies today, such as Facebook and Google, and separate from companies of yesterday, which are GE, Microsoft, Apple. So let me ask you a question. What do you think that sets companies of today, Google and Facebook, apart from the companies of yesterday, which are GE, Microsoft, and Apple? Next slide. Let's go back slide. So I would say that one of the key differences is companies of yesterday made a product and intend to make money out of the very product. Companies of today, Google and Facebook, the very product they offer actually consume money for them to offer to you. It takes money to maintain a search engine and actually consumes money to maintain a social network. But Facebook and Google, of course, makes money by secondarily attract advertisers. So what I will call, one day I have time, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to call these new business called the business of today, called it indirect business. As opposed to direct business of yesterday, if Microsoft make a software, they sell software. Apple make a computer, they make money from the product they sell. But today's company, the very product, there's a fundamental change in the business concept. The very product you offer not only does not make money for you, it actually consumes your money to maintain that social network or search engine. But you make money secondarily by attracting advertisers. So then ask questions, why was it yesterday's company did not know that? Why today's company all of a sudden realized that they should build this, what we call indirect business as such? Next slide. And that is because marketing has assumed an unprecedented importance in today's business. What is the most, if I give you a little piece of paper, we're all Christian business leaders here, if I give you a little piece of paper and ask you to jot down one thing, only one thing, that you can ask God, He will give you one thing to help your business. What is it one thing that you want Him to do to help you? So you got a little piece of paper, you write it down, I collect all the papers. I bet majority of our business owners probably will not put down internal staff management. That we can learn. Probably will not put down how to make the product, because we all know our trade. When a customer comes to the door, we can offer our service. So the real challenge is bring the customer to the door. So I bet the majority of us will fill on this piece of paper ask God for one wish to be satisfied would be something like, God, can you bring me more customers? So why today marketing become something of unprecedented importance? Why? Why there is such indirect business now, Google and Facebook, which makes money indirectly, not by the product they sell, but by attracting advertisers secondarily. I think the reason why marketing became so important today is because the supply and demand ratio inversion. Yesterday, you may be the only beer maker in Middle Tennessee. You don't need to advertise, because if somebody needs beer, they will come to you. But today, you can turn around there, somebody else does the same thing. Supply has outstripped or has surpassed the demand today. So when there are more people offering the same services, all of a sudden, obviously, you have to market. So the number one priority of yesterday's business was internal, how to make a product. The number one priority of business today is external, how to sell a product. What is number one step in selling a product? Is to understand your customers. Incidentally, I spoke about Tennessee China Chamber of Commerce earlier, that is what we're trying to do. We're helping Tennessee business to understand China, understand people there, so we can offer what they need. They have certainly done a good job the other way. Next slide. So marketing is very, very challenging today because there's information overload, noise level is very high, and the higher the water level, the higher your boat must be. And also, here's the catch-22 for most of us doing businesses. No marketing, no business, no money for marketing. So it's a catch-22. Next slide. So what's the best way to do it? Next slide. Today I want to share with you something I learned over the years, that is be original, counter-trend, and try to recognize what is it that most people are not doing. Now if you do, you can be more successful. Next slide. So this is the most important slide. I want to share with you, be differentiated, be focused, one message. Don't sell, educate, and tell a story. Next slide. So let's look at the first point, be differentiated. A road that much less traveled to doing things that everybody else is doing, that's a road much traveled, but we want to travel a road less traveled. So let's look at differentiation. Next slide. So you may have a message, your company, that is you believe is differentiated. So let's talk about what is the important test to examine if your company's message is indeed differentiated. A marketing message is differentiated if when your business name is substituted by that of another. If the message still actually, if it no longer works, then your message is differentiated. For example, when I try to devise our marketing message, I can just say, we offer the best vision. Wang Vision offer best vision. Somebody can just replace Wang with Smith. That slogan still works. Smith Vision offers the best vision. That is not differentiated. So think about your message. Just substitute your business name. Does that marketing message still work? If it still works, your message is not differentiated. So at the end, I thought, how am I going to find a differentiated message? Supervision. Well, somebody else can claim that too. So I finally said, you know what? Harvard, MIT. Unless somebody happened to go to Harvard, MIT, so therefore, that message is differentiated because you cannot just put somebody else's name on top of this quality. It doesn't work. Next slide. As Christian business leaders, our differentiation starts with our faith. That set us apart from other non-Christian business leaders. God has set us apart, Each of us is different, but even though we are different, we each have our differentiation. We also share the same power of spirit. So that's our differentiation as a group, as Christian business leaders. Next slide. Corinthians 12:4-1 said, now there are different gifts, but the same spirit. So it's important to know that that's our primary, most important differentiation as Christian business leaders. Next slide. All gifts and talents come from God. We are all different, have our unique gifts, but we also know our leader, our God, which is what we share together. Next slide. So let's look at what's the benefit differentiation. You may say, Dr. Wang, okay, I'm going to work very hard, try to find a differentiated message for my business. What's the advantage? Next slide. Differentiated business stands out because consumer has so many choices today. Next slide. Differentiation motivates your employee because if you define your differentiation clearly, your employee has more motivation, more excited to work for you because they know your business represents a unique differentiation. Next slide. Differentiation also lasts longer because difficult to be replicated will last longer. Next slide, longevity. So let's look at what are not differentiated ideas, the things not to do. Next slide. What are the not differentiated ideas? Next, just click. It will pop out things under. Yeah, quality and consumer satisfaction. The reason it's no longer differentiated, they are differentiated because they are assumed to be there. If you're not going to offer good quality or customer service, in 21st century, one just simply should not be in the business at all. Next slide. How about creativity of an ad? Or somebody say, oh, Dr. Wang, you should create those ads, this is color, different colors. That's not differentiation because somebody else could be more creative. Next slide. How about price? No, you're cheaper and somebody else could be even cheaper. So that's not differentiated idea. Next slide. How about breadth of product? Very often we are tempted to increase the breadth of our product we offer. We can do this as well, we can do that as well. Increasing the width of a product line will necessarily dilute your concentration and reduce your differentiation. Next slide. So then you say, okay, Dr. Wang, that makes sense. I like to see how can I find my differentiation. Next slide. There are 4 steps. Oh, by the way, none of these you need to make notes. My entire PowerPoint is in the hard copy for you. Research. You need to figure out in the area you're interested, what is it that market need? Next slide. Second, you have to define your differentiation based on the criteria we talk about. Next slide. You have to back up with solid credentials. You cannot be a fake differentiation. Something has to be truthful. Next slide. And that is also what differentiates us, Christian business leaders, from others because we are truthful and witnesses give honest testimony, as Bible says. Next slide. And finally, manifest. If you're shy, you don't want to communicate your differentiation, you should not be in business in 21st century either. Today, it's about marketing. Next slide. Because supply and demand ratio. So let's look at what are differentiated ideas. Next slide. Next slide. So being the first is a differentiation. So I just show an example that we were the first to do laser cataract surgery. Currently, we are still the only center in Tennessee using laser for cataract surgery. Everybody else still using blade. But that's a differentiation, being the first. Next slide. And the next slide. And staying first. Not only you want to be the first to introduce the technology, but also you have to stay first, continue innovation. Next slide. And attribute ownership. You know, one of the ultimate success of differentiation is the business is so differentiated, the product itself takes on the business name. Example, Xerox. is so differentiated that the process of photocopying actually take on the business name of Xerox company, or King Wipes, or Kleenex. That's the ultimate dream of differentiation. Attribute ownership. In our case, we use a smart eye surgery. It's a new laser cataract surgery, and we operate on Charlie Daniels. Sometimes we call it Charlie Daniel procedure. That's a differentiation. Attribute ownership. Next slide. Next, smart eye surgery. So also being the leader and offering the latest. As I said, we are the only center still offering laser cataract surgery and the 3D LASIK, the only center to do so in the state. Next slide. Next slide. And the heritage or education or history is differentiation. If in your company there's certain unique aspect of your heritage or education, that's a differentiation. Next slide. And for us, it's my schooling. And being a specialist. You have to be a specialist, and then that's a differentiation. For us, we are specialists of cataract surgery, laser, and 3D LASIK. Next slide. Preference by some of the influential people are differentiation. So if you can get some of those, we all know that. In this case, for our LASIK surgery, we have Dolly, Kenny Chesney, and others. Next slide. Next slide. Differentiation requires sacrifice. And here I want to tell you an example. Burger King example. McDonald's was very successful, explosively so. Over 1 billion served. And when Burger King looked at McDonald's, say, what have they been doing? They found that McDonald's claimed itself to be a kid's burger. It's got slides and toys and little pocket behind. So Burger King started doing the same thing, getting nowhere. The reason is Burger King forgot that being the first is a differentiation, being the second is not a differentiation. So what Burger King really should do is, McDonald's, you stay in your kids' burger. We're not going to put in slide and toys in our Burger King. We're going to put what? Bookshelves, New York Times, coffee. We're going to be adult burger. That is a differentiation. That's my advice to Burger King. A story of New Coke. For those of us who are old enough to remember, 20-some years ago, seeing the explosive success of Pepsi, the soft drink of new generation, Coca-Cola decided they're going to do the same thing. They say since new generations, new soft drink is what attract people, so they put on shelf, everybody remember what that is? New Coke. Disastrous. And Coca-Cola got together, headquarters, said, what is it? How come Pepsi-Cola can claim to be the new, and they were successful, soft drink of new generation? We can't do that. We claim new Coke, we got nowhere. That is because differentiation requires sacrifice. Just like Burger King should forego the kids' market and go for the adult burger, Coca-Cola should remember that its own original definition, it is the first major soft drink. You cannot be the first, the original, and the new. That's a contradiction in terms. So you have to stick to your original definition, and sometimes, you know what, you have to sacrifice in order to remain differentiated. So Coca-Cola realized that. They took away all new Coke and put Coca-Cola back. Still not enough. Better, but still not enough. Then they say, yeah, we put Coke back. How come still didn't get the market back? Then they realized that it's like a tree. If a tree is bent to one side, the only way to straighten that tree is to overbend to the other side. So they realized they need to overcorrect the mistake they made stupidly by putting new Coke a while ago. By putting back the Coke was not enough. So anybody remember what they put back on shelf? The classic, the original Coke. That was an attempt to correct the mistake they made of claiming new. So differentiation requires you to stick to your original definition of your company, and sometimes you got to say no. There's some sacrifice. Next slide. You cannot have all markets. Sometimes differentiation does require creativity. For example, first toothpaste came out anti-cavity. Second toothpaste came out whiteness. The third toothpaste came out, they say, somebody took anti-cavity, somebody took the whiteness, so we have nothing to differentiate from now. We got a new toothpaste, but sometimes think about, doesn't have to be the end product attribute. It could be the process through which the product is made can be an attribute you can differentiate. So they came out with fluoride. Is a fluoride really that important? No, but sounds differentiated, sounds important, and it has to do with the process the product is made, and it certainly differentiates itself. So you need to be creative. Sometimes, if you don't have the most production of this area among all the companies making similar product, but if your company was the best this quarter, that is a differentiation. Or your company has certain attributes that other companies don't have. Next slide. Focused. It has to be focused. Next slide. Steve Jobs, when interviewed a number of years ago, said, what is it that when you came back to Apple, you brought the company back? Steve said, you know what? He was interviewed by Fortune magazine. He said, every day people come to me with this idea, new computer idea, that computer idea. I spend most of my time studying those products, those proposals, and decide why I should not do this, why I should not do that. Steve Jobs was able to bring Apple back in the last 10 years was because he single-minded focused on few lineage product, iPod, iPhone, iPad. Resist the temptation to develop thousands of other computer products. Focused. Next slide. For us, our focus is laser. We differentiate our practice as the laser eye specialist. So everything I do, I stick with laser. So when LASIK became available, we became the first, and currently still the only center in Tennessee performing all LASIK surgery with all laser, no blade at all. So that's our differentiation, we stick with it. We're going to lose some market. Some people want cheaper procedures, blade, but you know what? Differentiation requires sacrifice. You just would not touch that market at all. Next slide. For example, cataract surgery, everybody else still using blade today. We use laser, and we stick to it. Some people say, I want a cheaper product, I want a blade. You know what? We don't do it. Differentiation requires sacrifice. Define it, stick to it. So some market, you're not going to touch it. Next slide. And the LASIK we talk about. So those are our focuses. That's an example. Next slide. Third is one message. Examine your company's brochures and marketing material. You'll find there's so much message, so many messages. A human brain can only take one message. There can be only one focus. Then you say, no, Dr. Wang, I've got all these things I want to sell. No, just one. Just one. For us, example is laser. We are laser eye specialists. That's it. So you got to examine your business. What is that one message you want to focus on? Just one. Next slide. So I already said, we, as an example for us, is laser. That's our one message. Next slide. Don't sell, educate. Very often, eagerness to sell our product, we keep on put out brochures and just, come in, get saving for this, cheap on sale. People would like to get educated first. And in the process of education, you benefit the listener, but also you sell your product. Next slide. So as an example of that, I published those textbooks. Those are some of the most widely used textbooks in cataract and LASIK surgery fields by surgeons worldwide today. So that's a process of education through which then we sell at the same time our business. Next slide. The final pearl is tell a story. Tell a story. Because at the end of the day, a human being makes a decision to purchase a product not because analytical thinking, but also emotional gut feeling. So we need to realize that is the most fundamental process, most important step in selling. So think about what stories you have, your company, that you can tell. You can tell a story. And I want to share with you that I've been struggling for many years. As a Christian and a researcher, I found sometimes faith and science clashes. So sometimes I don't know what to do. If you say, don't do research, don't touch stem cells and fetal wound healing research, then what do you do when you're faced with Michael J. Fox, Parkinson's disease, Ronald Reagan's, Alzheimer's, and Christopher Reeve's, who got injured spinal cord? For all of them, the only hope for treatment will come from stem cell, fetal wound healing research. Then you say, I'm going to do research without conscience. Then as Christians, we don't feel right. But God said, a fetus, an embryo, is alive. I started work many years ago as a student. We realized that people get injured and they get scarred. The PowerPoint, yes. Okay, good, perfect. So if we can go back to slide, into slideshow. So people get injured because the cornea is scarred after injury. And then we're trying to figure out how we can reduce the scar, because if you can reduce the scar, then we can restore the sight. Is the PPT coming up? Okay. And in the process of research, we realized that young people heal much faster. A fetus can heal without scar. You know, a 90-year-old, a 2-year-old break his or her leg will be up and running two weeks, but 90-year-old, same injury may never heal. So we know that the younger the person is, the better the healing ability. The person who heals the best is an unborn child. So here's the challenge. How can you do research on unborn child without touching any part of the baby? Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So here's the problem. Science and faith sometimes come into clashes. Do we do research without moral conscience, or do we not do research and leave these patients without help? Stem cell fetal wound healing research. Next slide. I do believe that God does have a plan for us. God does want us to do research, but at the same time, He wants to do it in the right way. Next slide. So what should we do then? How can we do fetal wound healing research to help adult patients heal without touching any part of the baby? We know a fetus can actually heal in mother's womb without scar, but adult heal with scar. That's what blind patient. Next slide. James 1:4 said that perseverance must finish its work so you may be mature and complete. Next slide. So we stumble upon this piece of membrane called the amniotic membrane. It's a piece of tissue surrounding an unborn child in mother's womb, and after mother can deliver a baby, the membrane collapses on the placenta and gets discarded. Next slide. So we thought maybe perhaps the membrane is what's giving the fetus the scarless, magical wound healing ability. So can we harvest the membrane, not touching any part of the baby, and then the idea is cover adult injured eye, recreate a fetus-like environment. Next slide. So let me show you some pictures. Next slide. I got those placentas from mothers after giving birth to children, donate these placenta to me, and I process in the laboratory. Next slide. And I got the amniotic membrane. The membrane surrounds the child and put in a test tube. Next slide. And we make into a little contact lens. Next slide. So this is our US patent. Next slide. So this is a whole history of product development. Eventually, after 16 years at this, next slide, we're able to come up with the amniotic membrane contact. It's a special contact lens made of amniotic membrane. And when the adult got eye injured, we put this amniotic membrane contact lens on to recreate a fetus-like environment, to encourage adult body to heal without scar, just like what used to do before birth. Next slide. So that's the amniotic membrane, contact lens. Next slide. And this is the membrane, came from mother donated after giving birth to children. Next slide. That's amniotic membrane contact lens. Next slide. Next slide. And we put a little drop in patient's eye. This is a patient after injury, will not heal for 7 months. Next slide. And we'll put the amniotic membrane contact lens on. Next slide. And this is before we treatment, the corneal ulcer blinding for almost a year. Next slide. This was amniotic membrane contact lens on. Next slide. And now she could see. Next slide. We use this type of sight restoration technologies for our foundation to help patients from around the world. All doctors donate services at our foundation. Next slide. Next slide, that's our event. So amniotic membrane contact lens is tapping fountain of youth. It's a new biotechnology that understand that God wants us to do research. God wants us to improve the quality of lives through research, but God wants us to do it in the right way. He wants us to understand fetal wound healing, but without touching any part of the baby. At onset, it seems there's no solution. There's no way to reconcile, no way to conduct research without touching the baby. But God never said right thing is going to be easy. Perseverance. So the point is persevere, keep at it. Believe that God, the world God created is not as contradictory as it may appear to be. It appeared to be contradictory, no solution to us mortals because we don't know better. But we have to have faith and believe that the world He created is perfect, is without contradiction. There is a solution at some point, at some time. The true test of faith is not when things are going well, it's when things are not going well. Next slide. So God has created this world is without contradiction. God does want us to do research, improve the quality of lives. In this case, study fetal wound healing to benefit adult eyes, to restore their sight after injury, by understanding how the little baby can heal without scar, without touching any part of the baby, by using amniotic membrane. Next slide. So that's a story. In the process that you became interested, you learned about the story, the moral of the story, you're fascinated by it. But at the same time, did you realize that I actually told you about a new bioproduct called amniotic membrane? So in summary, that the road less traveled in marketing consists of be differentiated. Understand the importance of differentiation. Understand that today's business, indirect business, such as Google and Facebook, is different from business of yesterday. Today's business very often is indirect because it's not the product you actually offer is going to make money for you. It's the secondarily advertisers. So you have to be creative. You have to know this is a paradigm shift of a product design, concept entirely differently. You have to realize that today, the number one challenge to all businesses, yesterday was internal, how to make a product. Today is external, how to sell a product. So marketing has achieved unprecedented importance. So along the marketing to do creatively, to travel on the road less traveled, is about find the differentiation, to be focused, one message, educate rather than sell, and tell a story. You have to examine your own company to see whether the message that you have defined for a company is it truly differentiated. By simply substitute your company's name by a competitor's name, see if that message still works. If that still works, that is not a differentiated message. You have to see that the 4 steps in differentiation: research, differentiation by solid credentials, and finally, communicate. You have to know what are not differentiated ideas, such as price competition, such as creativity of ads, such as breadth of product line, and learn what are differentiated ideas, such as being the first, staying the first, heritage, And also you have to know that differentiation sometimes requires sacrifice. What Burger King should have done is let go the kids' burger and define itself as adult burger. And Coca-Cola should realize that if it's the first original major soft drink, it cannot be the first and the new. Requires sacrifice and require creativity. Sometimes the end product attributes everybody else have taken, use it to differentiate themselves. You came on board, maybe not necessarily the end product attribute, perhaps the process by which the product is made can be a way of differentiation, such as toothpaste, an example, whiteness, anti-cavity. The third guy said, I'm going to call fluoride, the process of product making. Next slide. So at the end, we know that all gifts and talents come from God. We're all different. We have our unique attribute, each of us. We need to find what is that God wants us to do. What is the differentiation God wants us to define ourselves? But at the end, to know that ultimately, we as Christian business leaders, we differentiate ourselves because we have one powerful God. That's our differentiation. That means honesty in business dealings, disclosure, longevity, and maintain long-term relationship. All these is what Bible teaches us how to be a human being. Thank you very much.